My daughter's small hands trembled as she pulled back the last fold of wrapping paper. The box had been sitting on our kitchen counter all morning, a plain, square shape with her name written in a looping script she did not recognize. It was from her aunt, my older sister, a woman my daughter had met only a handful of times. I stood near the sink rinsing a mug, half listening to her hum as she tugged at the tape. She lifted the lid, peered inside, and the sound of her humming stopped so abruptly it made my shoulders tense. Her whole body seemed to freeze. She did not blink. Her fingers gripped the edge of the box as if it might vanish if she let go. I set the mug down and turned toward her. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, wide and uncertain, and then she whispered in a voice that made my chest tighten. "What is this, Mommy?" I crossed the room quickly and looked into the box. My breath caught before my mind understood why. Sitting on a nest of crumpled tissue paper was a small silver necklace. The pendant was worn, but still gleamed a smooth oval engraved with 2 words in delicate script. Little Sarah. My stomach dropped. The kitchen felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls were leaning in. My daughter reached for the necklace with the kind of innocent curiosity that made me want to grab her hand, but I forced myself to stay still. I knew this was not just a gift. It was something else. A message. A reminder. And the moment I saw it, I understood that my sister had not sent this to be kind. She had sent it to remind me of something I had spent my whole life trying to forget. I stood there in the kitchen with the necklace still lying in its box as the morning light filtered through the half-closed blinds and painted thin stripes across the counter. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air from my husband's early pot. Beside the gift sat 2 cereal bowls still half full of soggy flakes and milk, and a pink plastic cup with a bendy straw leaning to the side. The floor was littered with my daughter's socks, one blue with tiny stars and one purple with faded hearts. She never cared if they matched. She was still in her nightshirt, a worn cotton thing with a cartoon cat on the front, and a faint stain from yesterday's spaghetti dinner. Her hair stuck out on one side where she had slept hard and tumbled in her bed. It was a Thursday and there was no school that day because of a teacher training session. We had planned a slow morning, maybe a trip to the park later, but now that plan felt as distant as last year's summer. The package had arrived earlier than expected. I had heard the delivery truck while I was making toast and thought it was just some online order my husband had placed for his tools. When I saw the return address, my chest tightened. My sister lived 2 states away, and we had not exchanged more than a few polite words in years. Her handwriting on the label was instantly familiar, neat, and slanted, just like she used to address the Christmas cards that arrived late and felt more like obligations than greetings. I had not told my daughter much about her aunt beyond the fact that we were related. There was no reason to. No reason to dredge up the past or invite the kind of curiosity that led to uncomfortable truths. She loved getting mail, though. If you wrapped up a rock in tissue paper and tied it with ribbon, she would treat it like treasure and thank you with all the joy in her small body. That joy was why I did not hesitate to let her open it. I told myself it was fine. Maybe my sister had changed. Maybe this was just a kind gesture out of the blue. But when I saw my daughter's face shift from excitement to stillness, I knew better. The kitchen was warm from the oven I had preheated for breakfast muffins, yet a chill ran through me. I looked at the necklace again, and the name etched into it. My sister had chosen this deliberately. She had chosen to reach into my home, into my child's life, and plant something that belonged to a part of my history I had worked hard to bury, and I understood in that moment that this was not an accident. It was the beginning of something I would have to stop. My daughter kept looking from me to the necklace as if waiting for permission to touch it again. Her fingers hovered above the pendant and then retreated like she could sense my unease. "Who is little Sarah?" she asked, her voice curious but edged with something I could not name. I swallowed once, twice, trying to keep my face still. "Just a name," I said quietly, but even as I spoke, I knew it was the wrong answer. She frowned like she did not believe me. "Is she someone you know?" she pressed. I reached into the box and lifted the necklace out, feeling the familiar weight in my palm, the slight bend in the chain where it had been clasped too tightly too many times. It was colder than it should have been, as if it had been waiting in the dark for years. My husband glanced over from his laptop at the dining table. "That's an odd gift," he remarked without much thought. "Maybe it's second-hand." I did not respond. My daughter tilted her head. "Is it for me?" The innocence in her voice made something deep inside me twist. I closed my hand around the pendant. "No, sweetheart, it's not for you." "But it has my name on it," she said, pointing at the first word in the engraving. I shook my head slowly. "It doesn't." She stepped closer to read it again, but I shifted slightly to block her view. "Why not?" she asked. "Because you are not going to wear it." She blinked, clearly surprised by my firmness. "But it's pretty," she insisted. "You are not going to wear it." I repeated each word flat and final. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips pressing into the metal. My mind was already pulling me backward years into a room I had tried to forget. The smell of mothballs, the scratch of a wool sweater, the sound of my sister's laugh sharp and knowing. I placed the necklace back into the box and shut the lid, as if closing it could contain what it meant. My daughter's mouth turned down, but she did not argue further. She wandered to the living room, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her small feet padding across the floor. I stood alone with the box in my hands and my reflection faint in the glossy cardboard. My husband looked at me for a moment longer, but chose not to ask. I carried the box into my bedroom and set it on the dresser. I stared at it as if it might move on its own. In that stillness, the air in the room seemed to shift and thicken. I knew this was not a simple case of a misguided gift. This was a signal. A reminder sent directly from my sister with a precision only she would dare. And I understood then that if I did nothing, she would find a way to do more. I was 8 the first time I realized my home was not like the homes of my friends. Other kids came back from school to the smell of cookies or the sound of their parents asking about their day. I came home to a list of chores on the kitchen counter written in my father's blocky handwriting and my mother's absence explained away as her needing to rest. My older sister already had the golden glow in their eyes. She was the firstborn, the girl who could do no wrong, and I was the spare, the one who should watch and learn but never expect praise. They said it was because she was older, but even at 8, I knew it was more than that. She was their reflection, polished and smiling, while I was a reminder of everything they wanted to control. My sister was given dresses with lace collars and shoes that clicked on the hardwood floors. I was given hand-me-downs that smelled faintly of storage and cleaning fluid. She went to dance lessons twice a week while I stayed home scrubbing the bathtub or folding laundry. I remember the first day the silver necklace appeared. It was my 6th birthday. My mother presented it in a velvet box as if it were something precious. The pendant was engraved with Little Sarah, a name they sometimes used when they wanted me to act sweet and obedient. At the time, I thought it was lovely and I wore it proudly. That pride lasted until the rules began. "You wear it every day," my father instructed. If I forgot, he would yank it from my dresser and clip it around my neck with a snap that pinched my skin. If I complained, I was told not to be dramatic. The necklace became a silent collar, a way of telling me I belonged to them and their rules. My sister would touch the pendant sometimes with a smirk on her face and say, "It suits you," like she knew something I didn't. I began to hate the feel of it against my chest, but taking it off was not an option. When relatives visited, my parents would point to it as proof of how much they cared. "We got her that for her birthday," they would say with pride, while ignoring the way my shoulders hunched every time it was mentioned. At school, I envied the kids who could wear whatever jewelry they liked or none at all. I could not explain to anyone why this one piece mattered so much or why it made me feel trapped. The control extended far beyond the necklace. I was told what to eat when to sleep, how to style my hair. My sister's mistakes were forgiven with a laugh. Mine were punished with silence, or worse. There were nights when the shouting from my father filled the house, and my mother's sharp voice cut through it only to turn on me. If I cried, I was told to stop or I'd have something real to cry about. Sometimes it was a slap, sometimes it was the back of a hand. Other times it was the coldness that followed me for days. I learned quickly that staying quiet and keeping my head down made life easier. The necklace was part of that quiet compliance. It glittered in every family photo, a reminder to me and perhaps to them that they had me exactly where they wanted me. My sister loved the attention she received for her own achievements. She danced in recitals and posed for pictures while I stood off to the side holding juice cups or passing out programs. On the nights she performed, the house would be filled with relatives and neighbors praising her talent. If I dared to mention a good grade or an art project, my father would dismiss it as nothing special. The divide between us grew deep and wide long before I was old enough to understand the full damage it caused. The necklace became a weight around my neck in more ways than one. I slept in it because taking it off would mean trouble. Sometimes I dreamed of leaving it behind on the kitchen table and walking out the door forever. I would imagine the cool air on my bare neck and the lightness that would follow, but every morning I woke up to its cold presence resting against my skin. Even now, decades later, I can remember the exact feeling of that chain against my collarbone and the way it seemed to tighten whenever my sister smiled at me like she was in on a joke that never included me. Those years shaped the person I became, the girl who learned to survive by staying invisible until the day would come when I could choose to be seen on my own terms. That day felt impossibly far away back then, but the seed of it was planted every time I touched that necklace and wished I had the courage to take it off. By the time I reached high school, I had perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight. I studied hard not because my parents encouraged it, but because I knew grades were my ticket out. I stayed after school to work on assignments in the library where it was quiet and no one could interrupt me. My sister by then was already in college for a program she dropped out of within a year. She came home with stories about parties and people who adored her. My parents never mentioned the tuition she wasted or the mess she left behind. They only said she was exploring her options. When I got my acceptance letter to a university 3 states away with a full scholarship, I thought for a brief moment that maybe they would be proud. My mother glanced at the letter and said that was nice. My father asked how much it would cost them. When I explained it would cost them nothing, he nodded, but his eyes slid toward my sister as if to check her reaction. She smiled in that way she always did when she was about to cause trouble. Weeks before I was set to leave, I stopped getting official emails from the university. I called the admissions office and learned that my acceptance package had been returned with a note stating the recipient no longer planned to attend. I knew immediately who had done it. My sister had been alone in the house when the mail arrived more than once. I confronted her and she shrugged, saying I was overreacting. "Maybe it's a sign you should stay closer to home," she said. My parents refused to believe she had anything to do with it. My father told me not to invent drama. My mother suggested I could go next year after I had saved some money. The rage in me burned so hot I could barely speak. I contacted the university and begged them to reinstate my place. They agreed on the condition I could arrive in person with my ID and paperwork before the semester began. I packed my things in secret, and on the morning of my departure, I left before anyone else was awake. I took a bus with one suitcase and the last of my savings tucked in an envelope in my bag. College was the first place I learned what it felt like to breathe without someone looking over my shoulder. I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover what the scholarship did not. I made friends who saw me for myself and not for the role I had been assigned in my family. Meanwhile, my sister married a man with money and a smile that looked good in photographs. For a while, it seemed she had found her forever, but within a few years, she was back at my parents' house. The stories I heard later were predictable. She spent recklessly. She tried to control him the way she had tried to control me. He left, and she took whatever she could from him on the way out. My parents framed it as her being unlucky in love and opened their doors without hesitation. I visited once during that time, bringing gifts for my parents and trying to ignore the way my sister watched me like she was cataloging every piece of my life she could use against me. She asked about my job, about the man I was dating, about my apartment. I answered politely but kept details vague. I knew by then that anything I said could and would be twisted into a weapon. When I left that weekend, I promised myself I would keep my distance. It was a promise I kept for years until circumstances would pull me back into their orbit against my better judgment. Even in those years apart, the shadow of my sister's betrayal lingered. She had tried to take my future before it began, and my parents had let her. That knowledge sat in me like a stone, heavy and immovable. A reminder that no matter how far I went, there was always a chance they would try to drag me back. Years later, when my daughter was just a few months old, I made the mistake of thinking I could handle a short visit to my parents' house. They had been calling for weeks, insisting they wanted to see the baby and promising that things had changed. My husband had a work trip scheduled, and I convinced myself it would be nice to have some extra help. I packed a small suitcase and drove the 3 hours with my daughter asleep in her car seat the whole way. When I arrived, the house looked exactly as it always had, the same cracked flower pot by the front steps, the same faded curtains in the living room. My mother greeted me with a tight smile, and my father took the baby from my arms without asking. My sister was there too, leaning against the doorway with her arms crossed. For the first day, I tried to ignore the undercurrent of control that seemed to hum through the walls. My mother commented on how I held the baby, how I fed her, how often I changed her. My father set the thermostat higher than I liked and told me it was better for the baby that way. My sister inserted herself into every moment, offering advice I did not ask for and looking pleased when my parents nodded along. By the second night, I was exhausted. My daughter had been fussy all day, and I just wanted to put her to sleep. My sister came into the guest room uninvited and started telling me I should be more like her when she was younger, that I was too soft. I told her to leave. She laughed and stepped closer. The argument escalated quickly, her voice rising mind-matching until suddenly she slapped me hard across the face. The sound cracked through the small room, and for a moment I could only hear the ringing in my ears. My daughter startled awake and began to cry. I turned to see my parents standing in the doorway watching. They did not move to stop her. My mother said she is doing this because she cares. My father just shook his head like I had brought it on myself. Something inside me snapped. I picked up my crying daughter and walked past all three of them without another word. I packed in minutes, tossing clothes into the suitcase and strapping my daughter back into her seat. My sister stood in the hallway smirking as if she had won something. My parents did not try to stop me. The drive back was long and silent, except for the occasional whimper from the back seat. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other on the edge of her car seat, as if to remind myself she was real and safe. That night, as I laid her in her crib, I made a vow. I would never again put myself or my child in a position where they could touch us, hurt us, or make us feel small. Whatever they thought family meant, it was not worth the price they demanded. That night marked the last time I saw them for years. The memory of that slap, the sound of it, the look on my sister's face became a turning point, burned into my mind, a warning and a promise all at once. Standing in my bedroom now with the box on the dresser and the weight of the past pressing on my chest, I knew the necklace was no innocent keepsake. My sister had chosen it the way a hunter chooses bait, precise and deliberate. She wanted me to remember what it felt like to be under her thumb, to feel the cold metal against my skin and the invisible chain it represented. She wanted my daughter to wear it without knowing the history so that the pattern could begin again. The thought made my jaw tighten. I could see her smirking in my mind's eye, imagining me opening the package and feeling the old fear seep back in. But she had underestimated me. I was not the girl who wore whatever she was told to wear. I was not the young woman who let her sister ruin her chances and walk away unscathed. I was a mother now, and that changed everything. My daughter's world was small and bright and free of the shadows that had followed me through childhood. I was not about to let that change. I sat on the edge of my bed holding the box in my lap. The silver chain gleamed faintly through the small gap where the lid did not quite meet the sides. The name, Little Sarah, seemed to pulse in the soft light, like it was trying to call me back to a place I had worked too hard to leave. My hands tightened around the edges of the box until my knuckles ached. I could almost hear my sister's voice in the back of my mind, telling me it suited me, telling me I belonged to the family, whether I liked it or not. I thought of my daughter's face when she had asked who little Sarah was. The trust in her eyes was something I would not betray. I set the box down with care, not because it was precious, but because it was dangerous. That necklace had been a tool of control in my life, and now it was meant to become one in hers. Over my dead body, I thought. The air felt clearer once I decided it would never touch her skin. I knew the only way to end this was to send a message back, one she could not ignore. I pulled a sheet of plain stationery from the drawer and sat at my desk with the box beside me. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I uncapped a pen and for a moment just stared at the blank page. My heart was steady now, not racing the way it had earlier. This was not a decision made in anger, but in clarity. I began to write slowly, choosing each word as if it were a brick in a wall I was building between us. I wrote, "You gave me this once before, and it was never a gift. It was a collar. It was a reminder that I belonged to you and that I was expected to obey. You used it to keep me small. You used it to tell me I would never be more than what you allowed. I will not let my daughter wear your chains. I will not let her think love means control. I will not let her believe family means fear." I slid the necklace back into the box and closed the lid firmly, then wrapped it in brown paper from the pantry shelf. On top of the paper, I taped the letter folded into thirds. My handwriting was calm, precise. No scribbles, no angry slashes. This was my final word. I placed the package by the door and opened my phone. One by one, I canceled the automatic transfers I had been making to help with my parents' bills. I stopped the monthly grocery card reloads. I deleted reminders for their mortgage assistance and their overdue utilities. It felt mechanical, like clearing out old files on a computer, but under that calm surface was a current of something fierce and certain. I was taking back what was mine. When I was done, I looked at the package again and felt lighter. My daughter would never have to wonder why her mother accepted something that had once been a tool of harm. She would never think I was powerless to protect her. I picked up the package and placed it in the passenger seat of my car. The drive to the post office was short and uneventful, the streets quiet in the mid-morning sun. I handed the package to the clerk without explanation and walked back to my car without looking back. Sitting behind the wheel, I realized my hands were steady. I had drawn the line and there would be no crossing it. This was not just about a necklace. It was about the years of silence, the stolen chances, the slap in that small room with my daughter crying in her crib. It was about ending the cycle before it could start again. Whatever they thought they could take from me, whatever they thought they could pass on to my child, ended here. I started the car and drove home with the sun warming my face and the weight of the past a little less heavy on my shoulders. The first call came the next morning before I had even finished my coffee. I saw my mother's name flash on the screen and let it ring. A minute later, my father's number appeared. I let that one go too. By the time I had finished breakfast, there were 6 missed calls and 2 voicemails. I ignored them until the afternoon when my phone lit up again with their number. For reasons I still cannot fully explain, I answered. My mother's voice was sharp from the start. "What is this?" she demanded. "You sent back a gift for your own daughter. What kind of message is that?" I kept my voice even. "The kind of message that says you do not get to control my child the way you controlled me." "Do not be dramatic," she snapped. "It was just a necklace." "Just a necklace," I repeated slowly. "You know exactly what that necklace means." My father's voice cut in from the background. "She is being petty." I heard him clearly, even though he was not on speaker. "My mother said you are punishing us for something that is not our fault." "Really?" I said. "Who raised her? Who let her do whatever she wanted while I was treated like I was less than nothing? Who watched her hit me in front of you and said she was doing it because she cared?" Silence on the other end. "Then my father said she is your sister, and I am your daughter," I replied. That seemed to throw them off balance for a moment. My mother tried a different tack. "She has been having a hard time, you know. She needs family right now." "So you send my money to her," I said. The pause told me I was right. "How long?" My father muttered something I could not catch. My mother said since the first year she left. I let out a laugh without humor. "So while I was working 2 jobs to send you money for your bills, you were giving it to her?" "We did not know how to tell you," my mother said. I pictured them sitting together in their kitchen, the same one where I had spent so many nights doing chores while my sister was praised for existing. "You did not tell me because you knew I would stop, because you knew it was wrong." "She is our daughter too," my mother said finally. "And I am standing right here," I said. "I was the one who stayed, I was the one who helped, and it was never enough." My sister's voice joined the call suddenly like she had been waiting to pounce. "You are overreacting," she said in that familiar drawl. "It was a gift." "No, I said it was a message." She laughed. "You are always so paranoid. You think everything is about you. I think when someone sends a piece of jewelry they once used to control me to my child, it is absolutely about me," I said. "My father told me to calm down. My sister said you are cutting off your own family over nothing. I said I am cutting off people who have shown me over and over that they will not change. There was a silence, then my mother said, "So, you are really choosing this?" "Yes," I said. "I am choosing my child." My sister scoffed. "You always thought you were better than us." "No," I said, "I just finally realized I do not have to be like you." And then I hung up. The phone buzzed a few more times in my hand, but I set it face down on the table. My daughter was in the living room stacking blocks and humming to herself. I sat down beside her and started stacking too. My hands were steady and my chest felt light. Whatever storm they wanted to bring my way, I had already stepped out of its path. They could rage all they wanted. I was done listening. The calls did not stop after I hung up. They simply changed direction. Within hours, I began getting messages from numbers I did not recognize. Some were cousins I had not spoken to in years. Others were old family friends who suddenly had an opinion about my choices. "You cannot just cut off your parents over a misunderstanding," one cousin wrote. "Family is everything," another said, as if those words alone could erase decades of damage. One message told me I should pray on it and send the necklace back to my daughter as a gesture of forgiveness. Another accused me of being cold and ungrateful. I did not answer any of them. My husband saw the flood of texts and suggested we change our numbers, but I was not ready for that yet. I wanted to see how far they would go, how many people they would recruit to their side. It was almost predictable the way the same phrases kept appearing like they were reading from a script. "She is your sister. They are your parents. You will regret this." It made me wonder how many of them knew the truth and how many simply preferred the version they had been fed. I imagined my parents and my sister sitting around the kitchen table crafting a story where I was the unreasonable one, where the necklace was just a harmless trinket and I was making drama for no reason. Let them think it, I told myself. Let them believe whatever makes them comfortable. I had nothing to prove to them. The people whose opinions mattered were in this house with me, my husband, and my daughter. They saw the truth every day. They knew what I had survived and why I would not let it touch our lives again. The rest could talk themselves hoarse, and it would change nothing. A year passed before I realized I had not thought about the necklace in months. Life filled up with other things, better things. My small freelance work had grown into a steady business that allowed me to work from home and still be there for my daughter. My husband and I bought a modest house with a yard big enough for her to run in and a kitchen that filled with sunlight every morning. On Sundays, we made pancakes and she blasted music while brushing her teeth. Sometimes I would catch myself standing in the doorway, watching her dance around in her pajamas and think this is what safe feels like. No one called to tell me what I should be doing. No one showed up uninvited to criticize or control. I had learned that success did not always mean being the richest or the most admired. Sometimes success was building a life where the people who hurt you could not reach you. Word about my sister and my parents drifted to me through distant relatives and the occasional social media post. They were still living together, still in the same house, but I heard the strain in the updates. My sister's business ventures had failed again and again. My parents were selling the house because they could not keep up with the repairs and the bills. I did not feel sorry for them the way I once would have. This was the bed they had made together, and now they would lie in it. My energy belonged to my own family. I poured it into my work and my daughter's growing curiosity about the world. She had started piano lessons and showed a knack for it. At her first recital, she looked out into the small audience and found me instantly. She waved before she began to play, and I waved back with a smile that felt like it came from deep in my bones. No comparisons to anyone else, no shadows from the past hanging over her. Just her moment and my pride. I knew some might call my choice to cut ties extreme, but when I looked at my daughter, I saw the difference it made. She was confident she spoke her mind, and she did not flinch at raised voices. She had no reason to think love came with strings attached. In quiet moments when I sat at my desk working, I sometimes thought about the last time I saw my parents' faces and my sister's smirk. There had been a time when the idea of their disapproval would have crushed me. Now it barely registered. The revenge I had imagined years ago had turned into something different. It was not about proving them wrong with words. It was about living in a way that made their opinions irrelevant. That was the sweetest victory of all. My daughter's laughter from the backyard pulled me from my thoughts. I stepped outside and saw her running through the grass, chasing a butterfly, her hair catching the light. My husband waved from the grill and I waved back. The air smelled like summer and freedom. In that moment, I knew I had kept my promise. I had broken the chain. On a quiet Sunday morning, a year after the package arrived, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching my daughter spread syrup over her pancakes. The sunlight streamed through the window, warming the room, and the faint sound of music drifted from the living room where my husband was fixing the loose cabinet hinge I had ignored for years. My daughter told me about a dream she had where she was flying over a city made of candy, and I laughed until my eyes watered. In that moment, I realized how far I had come from the girl who once believed she had no choice but to obey. There was no necklace in the closet, no phone calls from people who thought love meant control, no silent comparisons in the air. There was just us, the life we had built, and the space to breathe without fear. I thought about the package, the name etched in silver, and how returning it had been more than just sending back a gift. It had been reclaiming my life. If you were me, would you have sent it back or kept it as a reminder of what you had survived?